Did you ever hear the Ormond family? They made carnival movies in the 50s and 60s, like really exploitation movies, but then they all survived a plane crash and decided to become Christian filmmakers and made really bizarre Christian movies in the 70s.
Oh,
really
that sounds like Brian's
stuff.
shit. That's wild.
Well, one of the movie of theirs that's my favorite is from before they reformed into Christianity, and it's called The Exotic Ones or The Monster and the Strippers. It's got a couple titles, and it's set on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And it's where there's a sleazy nightclub with strippers, and then the owner decides to have these people hunt and bring in Sleepy LaBeef, and he plays a swamp monster. He's got like a big diaper, and he hides in the swamp, and he attacks people and eats them, and so they bring him back from the swamp to be an attraction in the strip club, which means that he like stands in a cage and goes, while they strip, and the Ormond older boy plays a song to him that goes, the hurt goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And then at the end, he just freaks out and he like tears a stripper's breast off and goes berserk. It's absolutely amazing. Amazing movie.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast where the hurt goes on and on and on. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
And today we are excited to be joined by a very talented cartoonist, writer, and general man about town, Michael Kupperman.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
When you were talking about, you coming on the podcast, you eventually pitched us on these really weird movies that Denzel Washington made early on in his career. And I had never heard of Heart Condition. And you were like, no, you've got to see this. And not going to lie, I'm a little bit upset that I've now seen this movie because it's in my head now and it will never leave. But tell me a bit more about like why you were interested in talking about this one and what you think is interesting about it.
I've just been going back and watching a lot of the movies from the 90s because I think in a way it's the last era of a Hollywood machine doing stuff, the practical effects, the big sets sometimes, and then the absolute awfulness on the other side that you wouldn't see these days. This movie is profoundly awful. Yeah. I watched, it's fascinating. I mean, I think in some ways an awful movie is more interesting than a really good one. I'm not really interested in learning like behind the camera stuff from a really good movie, unless it's, a little unpleasant. But a bad movie, I really want to know more about this. Like, what were the deals? How was this pitched? I mean, it's such a high concept movie. It's obvious, it was like a ghost, but he's the ghost of a black lawyer in a racist cop.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost as though someone looked at the behind the scenes footage of Bob Hoskins in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and was like, that the movie. Just having him have his like interacting with something that isn't there and doing it believably, that's probably what sold the whole script. But it is a baffling choice to have. I mean, Denzel Washington was just starting off in his career, but he wins Glory. Like he wins the Academy Award for Glory, and then this is the follow up to Glory. This is the follow up feature.
And I think that this movie, when Glory came out, like I think he did those back to back. So this was in the can at the point that he won the Academy Award for Glory, which is fucking wild, honestly, to like have your Oscar winning performance followed up with this. But yeah, it's really something else. And I think you're exactly right, Michael. Like there is something so interesting about the machine era. In the way that, whereas now there's a machine, but the machine works completely differently. Back then, you could sell a script based on just like a pitch in a dream, as long as you had the right connections, even if you didn't necessarily have a track record. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, Brian, I don't know what research you did into the script, but the guy who wrote this, I think this was his first feature-length film, wasn't it?
He was his only feature.
His first and only.
Yeah, he's a TV guy.
Yeah, he went to Grey's Anatomy at a certain
so
point.
he mostly directs episodes of television, and that's been his whole career. And then somehow he just had a real dream, I guess. And wrote this fucking thing.
That's the funny thing is that James Perriott, who did write this, did an interview later basically apologizing for this movie.
Right.
But the studio came to him and was like, we need you to pitch us, probably just like out of their mind on cocaine, which is like, we need scripts and movie now. And he was like, well, I don't think the script is ready. And it's like, too bad, we're doing it. And then like, it had already thrown millions of dollars at it. And you can tell that this was a terrible decision by some big studio exec.
It's a terrible script. It papers over everything so that every conversation you'd expect to have in a movie like every point that a movie like this should make, it doesn't make. Like, it's so weird how there are actually very few conversations about race in this movie. There's almost no examination of the police and their relationship to racism. And
he doesn't even need to be racist at the end of the day, because there's just so many concepts they're running with in this. They could have just cut it completely.
It's so odd. Okay, well, here's one central thing that I thought of just after watching it this last time. Why is Denzel Washington there? He doesn't need anything from Hoskins. He doesn't want Hoskins to do anything for him. He doesn't care about making up with his mother, who says basically, he's trash, I want you to throw his life in a dumpster. And he's just like, oh, come on, Mom. He doesn't want anything. He finds out he has a baby, and then he's a little interested, but he's...
Oh yeah, and that's a big twist, and we'll get to that later on. I think there is something that is so bizarre about the movie for those exact reasons, that the conversations that seem like they ought to be there are not there. There's a lot of connective tissue that just is fully lacking. Yeah. And from the very beginning, you have no fucking idea what is going on, and you never really do figure out what is going on.
Yeah, well, we
spend a ton of time right there at the beginning with this, I don't know, senator or whatever.
Yeah,
in his crash pad, everything completely in slow motion. We're getting full screen title cards for every credit in this movie. A bunch of people who you have never heard of.
Hey, Steve Tisch founded Tisch School of the Arts.
I did notice that was Steve Tisch. Yeah,
no, his family did. But
Steve Tisch is the only name.
He's the prime minister of the New York Giants now. And I think that's the job description.
By the way, I timed it out. This title sequence is 4 minutes long.
I thought there was a problem with my buffering on my computer, because it's shot in a way that makes it look in slow motion, but not in good slow motion.
It's not actual
really
slow motion,
choppy.
right? They didn't actually overwind the camera.
It's that technique that they kind of perfected in The Empire Strikes Back that it duplicates frames.
Right.
And people got really obsessed with that in the 80s. And here we are at the beginning of this movie with this lady who is going to be very important for some reason, with her Minolta camera that also is important for some reason. We just see a lot of flashes, and then this old politician dies. Well, and we spend a lot of time on the cleanup, and some guy being like, I can't believe I voted for him. And
picture of H.W. Bush on the wall.
Cross-cutting that with the opening sequence of Bob Hoskins eating a bunch of burgers all at once, inventing the McGangbang, which is also being cross-cut with the rookie on the force who doesn't matter.
Right.
Trying to do his first Vice sting.
Yes. Michael, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I have several.
When did you first come across this movie? And how do you? I mean, is this a thing you watch regularly, or is this like a thing you've watched once and then again for this and will never do again after?
Every other month you go back and it's like, gotta fire up our condition again.
I have to have a movie start with a white man in an African mask doing meth.
Oh, I forgot about the mask.
I want to watch it that much. Actually, I just started. I think I've seen it 3 times. But it's
that's so many more.
Each watching, it opens up another circle of awfulness, and it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. I'm absolutely fascinated. So probably, I will be watching it
So this
did
opening,
you first see this in theaters, or did you catch it on a tape somewhere, or where did you find out about this thing?
No, I illegally downloaded it during COVID.
Nice.
Oh, so you saw it for the first time within the last couple of years.
I wasn't gonna.
Was it because of that?
1990? I had better things to do.
Was it because of that Ringer article that came out that was like, this is the worst movie Denzel Washington ever made? How did you come across it?
I just have been watching movies, and I'm fascinated by the 90s movies where they set up to address race.
Yeah.
And then like just fumble it, and Amos and Andrew is another one I watched recently, and there are more I know I'm forgetting. It's fascinating. Oh, that one's with Samuel Jackson and Nicolas Cage.
Oh boy.
Whoa.
Yeah.
These very cool team ups, I gotta say. Like Bob Hoskins and Denzel Washington is not an inherently bad pairing. It's just this movie does
I'd
nothing
argue
with
it's
them.
the only thing the movie has to offer you.
I agree.
Really.
Yeah.
True.
Bob Hoskins doesn't put much energy into being American for this or being a believable cop. But what he does put a lot of very visible energy into is seeming extremely unhealthy. Like he's really like glowering and grimacing and sweating. Like he's never looked so awful.
He looks like shit.
Yeah.
You can imagine like there was just like the makeup woman having to run in between and like squirt his face between takes every time just to get that level of sweat on there. Because he's drippy. It is a drippy film.
He is dripped out, and not in the good way. So
and he's the romantic lead and the best looking person apart from Denzel Washington.
Yeah, it's true. He's got to carry it as that romantic lead. So, to the point of like the clumsy handling of racism, this ends up happening pretty fucking quickly, because after this bizarre title sequence, Bob Hoskins is he's in his cop car with his partner, and he just peels the fuck out because he is trying to. I didn't understand what was going on here. Actually, can somebody explain what is happening here?
He sees Denzel is in the car,
right,
and he knows that his ex left him for Denzel.
Well, no, there's this whole scene where a maitre d' or security at a restaurant is like telling Denzel, like, you don't have any authority over me. And then Denzel slaps Chloe Webb.
Right.
And then he hustles them into the car when he sees Bob Hoskins running at them with his gun out.
Right. He whips out his gun. Yeah.
Just fully shoots the back headlight out. It's amazing because like Denzel just slapping Chloe Webb in the face, right, is addressed only one time later, and it's kind of hand woven away like, oh yeah, I was mad, so I hit her.
And he hits her hard too. She falls over.
Okay, well, here's one of the weird things about the movie that is that he's called a lawyer. They say he's a black lawyer several times. But there is no evidence whatsoever in the movie at any point that he is a lawyer.
Right.
No. There's a lot of evidence that he's a pimp.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much.
They never say the word pimp.
There is so much content of what is happening at the beginning of this movie that you're like, oh, okay, so this thing with the senator, it must have been Denzel setting up some kind of a Badger game with him, but then it went wrong. But then they're also showing that he was probably intentionally murdered by the drug guys.
Yeah.
You think so?
I don't know. Don't tell me what I think, because I don't have any clue.
I'm still baffled by Brian's use of the phrase Badger game.
You've never heard of Badger game?
No, it's a Badger game. I'm just picturing
a Badger game is like
I'm picturing little badgers riding other badgers with little mallets playing polo.
It's like what the Meisner brothers did up in Alaska during the gold rush. It's when you get someone into a room with a prostitute, you get them in a compromising position, you take a picture of them. When if she had the fucking camera, you take a picture of them, and then you're like, hey, this would be real bad for your wife to see. Give me $1,000.
It'd be bad sure for you.
There's that whole show where there's
that old timey word.
I can't remember the name of that show, but there's this whole show where a guy goes to places, especially in like India, where it's a common scam that they run in the big cities in India, and he'll intentionally get himself into those situations so that he can bring his camera crew in and counterbust the fraudsters.
That's what like GM tried to do to Ralph Nader back in the day, but the asexual king couldn't be taken down.
We stand in asexual king, don't we, folks?
We sure do.
But I do want to say what I found out looking around online at the IMDb trivia section and other places that have dubious reportage. it seems as though the earlier drafts of the script had his character as a pimp.
Okay, so because that makes sense, right?
They were shopping it around to a bunch of famous black actors. Everyone kept turning it down, and they finally got Denzel, who was he was pretty famous. He wasn't nobody at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
But he did
been
say
around for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, he had enough clout to say, this guy's not going to be a pimp.
Right.
But
they didn't.
They
but
rewrote
we're going to
nothing.
change nothing
else.
It was really just, find and replace for the pimp thing. They even had him still slap her and everything, but it's just oh yeah, the lawyer.
Yeah.
The lawyer, the extremely well paid, extreme upper middle class to upper class, conciliary. This is the guy who also goes around slapping women. It doesn't make sense.
No, and he has no office. There's no mention of an office. And when they go to get where he has his
partners,
money hidden, it's in the pipes of a bowling alley.
Yeah.
The hip hop bowling alley.
Insane.
It's not lawyerly at all.
Well, unless it's they could have, if they wanted to, gone down the Better Call Saul route and made him sort of like a scumbag lawyer, but that's not what they did.
Yeah, Vietnamese nail salon.
I don't think they had the imagination, honestly.
No, definitely
not.
No, absolutely not.
So what ends up happening after this then is that there's a foot chase. And this is the first time that we get this bizarre fucking foot chase is also the first time that we get what will be a recurring motif, which is the scat music. Now,
oh God.
It's
just awful. It's awful. There's scat all over the soundtrack. Every chase scene has scat in it. It's the kind of music that's kind of funky jazz, played on a machine.
This whole
then people
soundtrack,
go ow, and stuff.
Whole soundtrack is a nightmare. Just every part of it, every needle drop, every bit of non-diegetic music. It's a nightmare.
It sounds like they first recorded it with a fucking Juno synthesizer, and then they brought Kelsey Grammer into the studio and were like, "Hey, Kelsey, we need some scat. Show us what you got."
And Kelsey Grammer, after doing a whole rail of cocaine, is just like scooty ba ba boop ba toss salads and scrambled eggs. And he said the N-word.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
So that's what this chase culminates
that's
in.
What it culminates in.
This chase just culminates in Bob Hoskins running up to the camera and just saying the N-word into the lens.
Denzel has this conversation with the two cops, and then Denzel turns back to him and said, "Hey, you look like hell. What have you been eating?" And Bob Hoskins goes, "Your ass." N-word. and punches him.
Yeah.
It's
after
it's baffling behavior.
Shooting out windows.
Well, no, exactly.
He goes in blasting.
He punches through a window. He goes full Hulk. There's a moment really early on where that sets up the context of all this because, hey, at the police station, it's promotion week next week.
Yeah.
So the 1 week of the year where I guess everyone gets promotions. So this chase sequence is actually really bad because it might keep Bob Hoskins from getting a promotion, especially because his direct superior is black.
Right.
Yeah.
Who,
this
of course,
this is something I love in movies too. Sorry, that
they
have where they have no idea what police do or what crime really is. It's
I have a big project coming up. I have a big policing project coming up.
It's not going to get away with his golf game. I'll tell you this right now.
And I love too how it's that plus the fact that this his superior, the chief of police or whatever, is the classic archetype of the, your methods are just crazy, but you get results, damn it. Whereas there is no evidence whatsoever so far that Bob Hoskins is in any way, shape, or form competent at his job whatsoever.
No. We're just going to talk about his history as an officer. Yeah.
No, just to be very clear,
This opening scene, he's such a bad cop that they would actually fire him in real life.
They would actually fire him. Do you know how hard it is to fire
who would
a
ever be
cop?
fired.
Like the union comes in, it's like, yeah, it's probably best we let him go. Yeah,
Not
he
worth
punched
it.
through a window.
He did a lot of property damage for no reason, and also engaged a man in a fight over personal reasons for which the police department could be held liable for potentially a hate crime. Like,
It's madness. It's madness. But when we open the scene with him getting chastised, it's just laughing. It's like a solid 3 minutes about laughing at him using the N-word. Like, it's it's not a hurtful word really in this universe. It's more like
Because it's the 90s, AJ.
Yeah, it's just like, it's so funny that this white guy would say the N-word. Like, isn't that hilarious? And it's like, no, it is not.
His captain is, I think, Roger Mosley. He was the helicopter pilot on Magnum PI. That was
Oh, yeah.
And like, it's another one of those moments where the performance almost saves it. It's just, if you remove that scene completely from context, maybe, and you just watch that one scene, you're like, yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Because again, they're kind of playing against the material enough.
I feel like the black actors all got together beforehand and were like,
what are we going to do with this?
Get through this. Just get through it.
Yes.
And the movie uses them as props
stress.
in a very gross way. It's like anytime they like make a joke about black people, there's always at least one black actor laughing at the joke to like make them to make it be like, oh, it's okay, we're all in on it. It's
Because
like,
again, to be very clear, the guy who wrote the script is white.
He looks like Bob Hoskins with hair. Actually, it's very disconcerting.
Oh, that explains why they cast Bob Hoskins as the romantic lead then, maybe.
And also gave him a piece halfway through. Which we will talk about.
We certainly will. One thing that was funny to me about this whole setup, Michael, is that it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that you have done with your comics in the past, like with like Snake and Bacon and like, damn it, Snake and Bacon, you just blew up the entire town. What do you have to say for yourselves? It's like that kind of thing, but played pretty much completely straight.
Yeah, but there's no stakes. It's like, what is his job? He just kind of sits around and then later goes for, makeover montages and stuff. And
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, what is his job? How,
He's
who is he?
He's Vice, and then he's put on suspension for a while, but then like he's still being watched over by the cops like a hawk. Like it's very unclear. Like
his sergeant tells him that he's a desk sergeant now.
Yes.
And he's wearing a uniform. And then you never hear or see anything about that again. You never see him as a desk sergeant.
You just see like his desk just piled up with paperwork, the entire department like running around being like, none of the paperwork has been done. Where is Bob Hoskins? And it's just him
so
getting his nails done.
The freeform police station where, you come in if you want to.
Yeah, it's a WeWork. The police station is a WeWork.
It's like a tech company. It's like
We found that the Montessori approach actually brings a lot to law enforcement.
So at this point, then, we have established that Bob Hoskins is the character. He is the protagonist. He's the guy who we're supposed to be rooting for some reason. Again, no reason whatsoever has been given for why this should be the case. It's just assumed that we're going to want to go along with it.
Just because he's on camera the most.
And now we're going to raise the stakes again because Denzel actually gets brought into the station with the two women from before. And one of these women is...
Crystal Garrity.
Crystal Garrity is the character name, or in real life, what's her name again? Because
Chloe Webb. Chloe Webb. Nancy.
To be honest, I just think of them based on their real names because these characters are nothing. So
yeah, it's a shame too because Denzel Washington's character's name is incredible.
What is it?
It's Napoleon Stone.
It is?
His character's name is Napoleon, and it's never commented on.
Further evidence for the fact that he was a pimp right up until they started shooting. We meet the lady, the prostitute lady, who is the ex of Bob Hoskins. And speaking of things that get set up and never have any culmination, again, we have this long conversation about the camera.
Yep.
Yes.
About how she uses the flash and the camera for self-defense, which you think is going to be, in like a more like tight screenplay of this era.
Yeah.
That camera would be the most important thing by the end of the movie.
Yeah, that'd be
Wait until dark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Throwing developer into his face or whatever.
They've set up Chekhov's camera here, and it never actually fires. Very strange.
Really said because there's also the rolls of film that he says he hasn't developed, and you're like, oh, that's going to be the key to all. No, it's not.
Well,
okay,
hold on.
but
That's the thing is that it's not fully Chekhov's gun because it doesn't fully go off, but it kind of like half goes off.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, well, the film footage is important, and it leads them to the actual
one of
criminal
the many
underworld
steps of the process, I guess.
But also, who is the bad guy in this movie? I don't understand. He's just kind of an asshole, like white guy with a cell phone. But beyond that, I really know we learn nothing about him.
No,
but
he's I think in maybe the original script he would have been like the other pimp, like Denzel would have been in a pimp war with this guy. Which would maybe make sense. I have no idea who the guy is.
Did you say? I'm sorry. Did you say in a pimp war?
Yeah, pimp wars. You know how it is.
Yeah. That would be a movie. No, but the influence of Miami Vice is very present in this movie because a lot of it is like crime is just vibes.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they just like hang out in a abstract expressionist set beach house.
Right.
Waiting to do a murder.
I'm very excited to talk about that, because
we have this long dramatic scene, and they're like, we really have to have the drama land with the ex. Where she
you really got to make them root for that relationship.
Beautiful synth underscoring. Beautiful.
It's not beautiful.
It's not beautiful at all.
It sounds like a man died midway through composing it. The relationship that they establish in this first scene is one that seems to have been like, it was a very messy relationship. They broke up, and it's like, there's like years and years of backstory between these two. Like you can see the pain in Bob Hoskins' eyes because he's such a good actor, and Chloe Webb is actually, I think, giving a pretty good performance with like no material that she's given, and you can really see like
drowning it in synth.
She's doing her best.
Deep relationship that you find out later in the movie lasted 4 months.
and I can't. It's like in this moment, I can't buy it. I just cannot buy what they're selling because you look at it and it's like, this wouldn't happen. Like
all of a sudden, too, this movie asks you to like take the drama seriously when it's been trying to be a comedy and not even succeeding at that.
Yeah.
Nope.
So we follow Bob Hoskins back home to his terrible apartment. Very spacious, but terrible. And he has a cat that he feeds milk and bourbon.
Yeah, Jim
that he
Beam
mixes together in a bowl. Actively trying to kill both himself and the cat. And lo and behold, Bob Hoskins' lifestyle catches up with him.
Oh, my God.
Old Detective Mooney has a heart condition.
Oh, what?
What?
Which would be a surprise to everyone outside of America, because this film has a different title in every other region but America, and it is my great horror to share with you that the title of this film outside of the U.S. is Black Ghost.
It's a better title, honestly.
It's a more accurate title.
It's more accurate.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you'd think he'd take over Bob Hoskins' body. But he's outside it as a ghost when he appears, like wrestling with his arm and stuff.
Right.
Which seems like a weird way to go with it. He's like haunting his own heart for reasons we never find out.
Right. Well, everyone knows that the heart controls the body. It's the thing that controls how the arms go.
Right.
He has a moment where he calls 911. He's brought in to surgery to get a heart transplant because in the 1 in a million chance that there would be like a heart, and it turns out there is, because Denzel Washington's character has died in a car accident.
Yeah.
How about that?
And the two doctors have this horrible banter where they talk about, hey, what profession was this guy? Oh, it was a real terrible profession. Oh, was he a proctologist? Nope. Was he a dentist? Getting closer. Oh, he's a lawyer. Oh, don't worry. We could talk bad about him. He's not going to sue us for malpractice. And I'm like, what is happening?
I was transported back to so many horrible stage comedies that I've seen because
it was theater writing.
It's theater writing.
Totally.
Bad theater jokes. I have seen every season on Broadway, there's at least 2 or 3 shows that come along, and these shows are always the same. And it's people talking to each other, telling these jokes that aren't funny. And as the movie goes on, as the play goes on, you just sit back, you sink lower and lower into your seat, and you say to yourself, my God, I want to die.
Josh is actually sliding down his chair as he speaks.
Applying the method here.
Yeah. So we have this transference of Denzel Washington's heart into Bob Hoskins' body. And Bob Hoskins wakes up a few weeks later.
That's how that works, yeah.
To be confronted by what I can only describe as a Lynchian nightmare of his 4 cop friends doing a barbershop quartet very badly at him.
This movie has everything.
While the largest black dildo you could imagine flops around between his legs.
Yeah.
Maybe the one that you could imagine.
This is the part, by the way, guys, that, I posted, I think, in our group Slack. This was when I posted, I feel like I'm having a stroke watching this because there is like it's like the logic wants to connect but doesn't. It's as if everything that wanted to bring these things together in terms of connective tissue was forgotten. And so you have these signifiers and you have this dialogue and you have this performance that's so just bizarrely ungrounded, and you feel like you aren't experiencing reality. That's really the only way I can put it. It was so strange.
It's so weirdly handled. So Bob Hoskins has his thing. He collapses in his apartment. Then his partner is talking to the doctor, and the doctors are like, his heart's not good. He's going to die unless we get another heart right away. And then, oh, your ship just came in. We got a new heart.
Right.
Well, and also the way that they make that cut, too, is like his partner is like, are you saying he's dead? And then the doctors are like, no, he's saying he will die. He doesn't get a heart.
So they say then your ship has come in, which that's not how, transplants work. You don't just get the next heart. It turns out that fine, whatever.
5 hearts just sort of like fell off the loading dock and moved up the closest one.
That I couldn't get over the first time I saw this and still kind of can't is they just suddenly Denzel Washington is a corpse there at the hospital.
Right.
But they never say what happened.
No.
It's just like, it was a car crash. It's like there's no context. It's just, he just died in a car crash. Here he is. He's dead now.
Yeah. We don't see it. Why don't we see it?
It's almost as if there was supposed to be something there and they cut it, but I don't think that's what happened. I think it was just written this way.
They hand wave it away a little bit later, where apparently the white guy with the big cell phone had him killed because he thought that Crystal Garrity had given him the photos.
Oh, does he say that?
Senator. Yeah. That's later on, and you listen. I would not blame you for not hearing it. I had to pause and go back because every major plot development, they just breeze right on past so they can get to more shenanigans.
Right. They tell you that Denzel is dead by pulling the sheet off his face.
Right.
And on the soundtrack, now this was the era of Paul Simon came along first and lots of African rhythms. Yeah. And the soundtrack goes,
It's literally Ladysmith Black Mambazo. It's
wait, literally as in that it's actually?
It's actually, when I watched the full through the whole credits to see what all the music things were, and the very first thing listed was Ladysmith Black Mambazo. So it was
wild.
Brian, were you watching the credits to see if there was a post-credit scene that was setting up the larger heart condition universe?
Extended universe.
It's gonna have a crossover with Howard the Duck. It's
typical.
Just a shame.
Every choice in this movie is weird. Every choice is off, is wrong, is the result of different drafts. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just
black guy. Yeah,
he's from LA.
He's an African American. It doesn't.
He has a lot of African art in his house. To be
true.
Fair.
Bob Hoskins later calls the thing that's been put on him a white curse, which if this movie is actually about white guilt,
I think if you say this movie and then you say about, there's nothing else that you can really keep going with.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no theme here. It's just this guy had a bunch of things that he liked to see in movies and put them all in one
That's
movie.
exactly right.
If Bob Hoskins dies and his heart is transplanted into somebody else, is that person have a Denzel Washington and Bob Hoskins inside of them?
I feel like the answer has to be yes.
I like this. It's like Bicentennial Man, but for
you can do it.
Like
You'd have to use CGI
transplants.
for Hoskins.
Yeah, you can't still do it.
Because what ends up happening here is that after Bob Hoskins wakes up, after there's this really weird fucking situation with this big black dildo, and it's just played for laughs in the strangest possible fucking way.
it's a truly, genuinely bizarre joke. And I do have to give them credit for just like the
and then
absolute...
he marches to the surgeon played by Alan Rachins from LA Law and goes, "You put it in, take it out." And I can't remember what he says, but it's
the dildo's just wiggling on the desk.
The dildo's like, bah, like
you put it in, you take it out. The nurse says, "You want to tell me where he had it?"
She would know that. She's a nurse. She's probably dealt with it before.
Listen, we
Jokes
cannot.
are so vaudeville.
The fact that nobody in the medical field in this has any idea how medicine works. He leaves at one point and his arm is in the air, and two paramedics, he turns to them and says, "Hemorrhoids." And the paramedics are like, "Yep, that's where hemorrhoids are, the arm. Good day to you, sir."
Bob Hoskins heads back to the precinct. More people make fun of him for his heart for some reason. And then,
how did everyone else find out that he had a black man's heart before he did? They're not relatives. The doctors aren't supposed to be just disclosing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
was it in the papers?
This should be medically confidential information.
Should have shown some headlines.
The spinning paper
Racist
comes
cop
towards it.
gets black man's heart. Extra.
But Bob Hoskins then goes out to eat a burger. And before he can eat this delicious burger, he's stopped by a man who is none other than, it's Denzel Washington. How did he
Lady
get
Smith
there?
Black Mambazo once more.
And he's there, and he's a ghost. And the way that you can tell that he's a ghost is that, number one, he says, nobody else can see you, so when you are fighting with me, it's going to look like you're just moving around by yourself and fighting with a burger. And then number two, we also get additional shots of Bob Hoskins dancing around and fighting a burger by himself. So
and he's very good at it. He's the king. That's why he did Roger Rabbit.
He's such a great physical comedian. It's wasted on a film that someone's like, "Oh, you got a black heart now," and it's like it's the same color as before. Like they spend a lot of time talking about how his heart is so different. It's like, I mean, it's a healthier heart,
right? But again, this is a movie that is in the early 90s. And so the message ultimately is never going to be anything about structural racism. It's going to be, at the end of the day, we're all just people. And we need to just stop being so, we need to be more colorblind. We need to stop being so, we're all just people. A heart's a heart,
Yeah, I will say Steve Tisch, the producer, he also produced Soul Man. The infamous Soul Man.
Oh my God. It's all coming together.
Jesus.
Oh my God. There was a thing in the 90s too, I think, especially with curses and with a lot of magical, high concept, comedies like this.
Right. And Denzel, again, has no reason to be there. He's not, there's no quest. Right. He's not burning with injustice. He doesn't seem to particularly care about anything.
There are two things that Denzel, I think, cares about in this movie. One is he kind of very blasé says, "I need you to solve my murder."
Right.
Initially. And then his actual purpose in the movie is to glam up Bob Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins goes to his shrink to analyze his dreams. And he said that lack of sex is bringing him down. So then he went to a whore who said his life's a bore. So stop whining because I'm bringing her down. So sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me.
Oh, it all keeps adding up.
I think I've had enough. Am I just paranoid or am I stoned? Anyway.
I'm the scat man.
I am also the scat man. The shrink prescribes him some medicine, but the ghost is still following him around. Denzel Washington's ghost. And this, by the way, sets up what we're going to be seeing for the rest of this movie, where Bob Hoskins is going to be having a conversation with somebody, and Denzel Washington is going to be basically appearing in different places around the space and being like, having like little commentary on what's going on and being like, well, that's, I don't know about that. That's kind of wacky. Like, it's just, again, it's supposed to be
every single
fucking scene. It's supposed to be witty. It's supposed to be clever, and none of these jokes land.
And any time the dialogue goes towards something interesting or meaningful, it backs away again, or it just uses language to like gloss over. Anytime there's the slightest move towards anything that could be potentially interesting, it's immediately killed with a wisecrack or, a cut.
Yeah, including this very scene where rather than playing the tension of, well, it seems like he is maybe not entirely mentally well. Is this something that dramatically should be an issue of concern? Should we maybe as viewers even be wondering about this, asking the question of if maybe some of this is just going on in his head or not going on in his head? That could be interesting ambiguity.
Is there any trauma? Does he have any trauma? They never bring it up.
No, he has no life. There is nothing about him that exists beyond the first moment we saw him on screen.
He loves burgers.
He sure does.
And bourbon and milk.
But I think to your point, Michael, like a more interesting version of this movie would be exactly that. It would be asking then, well, is this really what's happening here? Is he really being visited by like the ghost of this dead lawyer? Or is this his sort of stand-in for something that is deeper that he needs to resolve within himself? Because that's actual drama.
Which the movie kind of hints at, because Denzel does at several points be like, so where does all this racism come from? Like, he really tries to like analyze this guy, but there doesn't seem to be any sort of effort to try and do the same to Denzel's character. Like, it's never like trying to figure out like, what does Denzel want? What is his unfinished business? Like, why?
Well, and I think
Denzel is his character.
And I think partly, like we said, it's like all the black actors in this movie just got together and were like, how are we going to handle this?
Right.
Denzel plays this well by just not having anything stick. Like, there are no dramatic moments to him except for the moment where later on Bob Hoskins is walking away on the beach and he's like, hey, come back. Everything else is as light as a feather with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He reacts to his mother saying, he's trash, throw his life in a dumpster. I hate him. He's scum.
Yeah.
And he reacts, as if someone had told him that the sandwich he wanted was unavailable. And he has to make another choice.
Yeah. So Bob Hoskins has made it over to Denzel Washington's house.
Yep.
And this is a great example of, what is it that people call it? Cocaine architecture.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
That house was the old, like, you go upstairs and then there's just like a little like aquifer that you walk across that's like a loft over the living room and gets into the bedroom.
See, at first, to your point of like thinking, well, is this I had thought that it was his office. I thought that it was a very lavishly appointed office.
Right, because it doesn't look like a home at all.
And then I realized it was his house. And I was like, what is going on
This
here?
was the time when people would like decorate their homes with like a little like half like pillar, like a white pillar.
Yeah.
And then like it maybe a small floral print, something or other, and then like a red couch.
Yeah.
That's like too stiff.
Or like that weird apartment that we were looking at the other day, Brian. Remember that weird like fuck pad that we found where it was like there was just like a jacuzzi.
You guys are looking at fuck pads without me?
We were just looking at weird real estate listings, and we found this weird apartment in downtown Grand Rapids where there was like this.
Oh, it's so fucking weird.
There was like a shower like just off of the living room that you could just kind of like step into and step back out of. And there was like a half circle of like glass.
It looked like one of those hotels you can rent in Thailand, like by the hour.
But it was a condo.
Home.
It was like an entire house.
They expect people to live there. And that's the situation that so many people apparently found themselves in the early 90s.
I don't know. Yeah, I feel like you can speak to this maybe better, Michael. Maybe you remember the early 90s better than I do, because I was, very, very young at the time.
Tiny baby.
I'm afraid so.
Is this, tell us a bit about the cultural context here, both for this architecture and just for everything else. What did you notice?
It was a terrible time for discussion of anything, discussion of race. I think that was the year before I started working at Life magazine for a bit, which was a decaying Republican institution at that point. It was.
Did all the liberals go to Time and all the conservatives went to Life? Is that kind of how that broke out, or?
Life had actually been officially canceled in 1972, and then they brought it back in the 80s and made it a monthly, and it was this incredibly boring magazine with the Kennedys, our royal family.
Oh, sure.
The actual royal family, or just the most boring stuff. The one issue I threw them all away. I had them and I threw them away. It was just a disgrace. But there was one issue that I wish I'd kept, because it was where that financier had bought MGM, and I think he held it for like a year or two. His name was Giancarlo Peretti, and I've searched and searched online for this, and I haven't been able to find it. But you know that way back when, in its classic era, 1939, Life did a photo of the MGM stars, and it was like more stars than there are on heaven. It's this huge photo with like all the biggest stars of that era. And so this guy redid it, but it's all like people like John Schuck and Pat Morita. And it was so funny. And I've tried to find it, but I haven't been able to.
These people are perverts. Like, how are they even allowed to live? I don't understand.
Michael, would you describe the rivalry between Time Magazine and Life Magazine as being a pimp war?
Yeah. No, I mean, Life was a dead duck. This was also back in the era where people at magazines and places like that could stay loaded half the day.
Right.
Which is really something that like cut off right as you entered the 21st century. So there was a lot of that going on. It was not a healthy scene. Also, it was they had just merged with Warner Brothers.
Right.
And
oh, wow, that's right.
Then when I was there, they fired 600 workers one week.
Jeez, oh my God.
Guy at charge got a $72 million payout. It was really controversial.
Sounds about right. I think, though, that this is interesting, though, because this sort of like the extreme excess of the late 80s to early 90s actually, by comparison to what's happening now, seems tame, relatively speaking, which is insane. Yeah. It's insane how much worse things have gotten. But
there was a little bit more distribution, right? Like there was a wider part of the paddle was in this upper class. And there was money to spare for shit like magazines that even these hoary old like zombie things like Life, which just seems so divorced from our current reality. And movie studios could just keep sort of churning things out. So it didn't like Heart Condition was a minor investment. It wasn't nothing, but it was like just another movie to put out. People were still going to theaters. People were still buying magazines. People were still getting their houses built like in this fucking movie. Yeah. A very strange, it was like there was wealth and there was excess, but there was no taste because all the gay people died.
Right.
Like all of the great like creative minds had been wiped off of the face of the earth.
Right.
Yeah. And so everything is just gray and bizarre.
This is not a great movie to look at, I will say, overall. It's a very ugly film.
No. The DP has gone on to do some other things. He worked a little bit on Breaking Bad and did the first season of Better Call Saul. So he had more on offer later. But there's a lot of people who now have this like blinkered nostalgia for anything they see from the 90s with film and practical effects. Yeah. And I would just lead them to this movie and say, is this what you want?
Yeah, for sure.
Really exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah. So Beyond the House, Bob Hoskins talks to Denzel's mom. Right. And we've mentioned what happens there. Yep. She's especially upset that he like never settled down and had a kid and he doesn't care. So they leave and there's this money that's stored away at the bowling alley, which is called Hip Hop Bowling.
It's a hip hop bowling alley, and his money is hidden in the pin setting machines. Right, and they have to go get it. And then there's a confrontation.
Said this was where he made his real money, not as a lawyer, but off of the like shoe rental fees.
You all have to help me here with the plot a little bit because.
I don't think we
but I think we can do it together. I think we can all work through this together.
Sure.
So he goes to the hip hop bowling place in order to get the money, but he needs the money because Denzel was trying to get Bob Hoskins to pass as a rich man so he can buy a date with Crystal Garrity, who is working for the bad guy who killed him.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
sounds
you're not confused about this at all. You are 100% correct.
By the
that's
way,
what the plot
listeners,
is right
if
now.
you're confused right now, so are we. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, so here's the thing: is that the bowling alley is also run by Denzel Washington's character's brother.
apparently, yeah.
His name is Archimedes Stone.
Yeah.
The greatest name for a character we see one time.
I can see why the mother was so disappointed giving them names like that, and then they turn out like bowling alley manager and pimp.
Highly respectable lawyer. How dare
lawyer
you?
pimp. God. This really is then after we've got the heist at the bowling alley. There's this whole fucking
The
situation.
bowling alley that's like half nightclub too.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
That's the one time where he meets black characters who are not Denzel Washington's family. That's the only situation. And it's this threatening crowd. Yeah, and then one of them is that huge guy who I always
bouncer
think
guy
of
or whatever. Bubba.
Yeah.
They named him Bubba. His name is
Right.
Bubba. I need that to be
enormous
said.
guy who then, when he gets out of the bowling alley, chases him with a bowling ball,
Right.
which
Yeah.
he then pounds on the hood of the car,
Like
just
you do.
screaming.
You see what
and
happens?
pounding.
You see
Like
what
see what
happens,
happens when you
Larry?
fuck a stranger in the ass.
It's just insane.
This part was almost like there were
It's
so
so not
many
good.
there were so many points in this movie where if it had been dialed in correctly, it could be entertaining, but it's not. And it's so weird because
Yeah.
like on paper you describe a scene where a guy goes into a hip hop bowling alley to get cash from out back behind the pin setters, comes back around, gets in a fight with the people who try to keep him from taking the money, and then there's a foot chase leading to a guy smashing the hood of a car with a bowling ball. That sounds fun, but it's not.
He gets into the fight because he is being puppeteered by Denzel Washington.
Denzel makes him hit his brother. And like, there's also the whole thing when they're back behind the bowling alley and he's like, this place is full of Black Panthers. They all want to kill me. And it's like, oh yeah, right. He's racist. I forgot.
I
forgot about him being racist.
I felt like I was
Occasional reminders I'm racist.
just in case you forgot that at the beginning of the movie, he kicks the whole thing off by calling Denzel Washington the N-word. Yes, he is in fact racist. Are you fucking kidding me?
But they present it as a kind of mild condition, like, oh, this is really aggravating my racism.
Yeah. Well, it's
almost like
his
it's a heart condition.
So at this point, then Bob sets up a nice hotel. He sets up a nice hotel situation because, again, there's this convoluted thing where he is purchasing a date with Chloe Webb, who, again, is an escort, so that he can basically A, put the moves on her because he wants her back from a personal perspective, and B, grill her for information about Denzel Washington's murder. And so we get this transformation montage.
Where he has to run up a hill.
We have a makeover. We have he trying on different suits again in one of the most dire looking facilities you've ever seen.
There are suits just thrown out onto stone slabs. It looks like something out of a Fritz Lang movie. It's like incredibly bleak.
Longtime listeners might remember our Josie and the Pussycats episode where we talked about the transformation montage there, which is absolutely fucking delightful. This is the opposite of that in every conceivable way. It is the worst thing that you have ever seen.
It's so funny because, Denzel doesn't really, there's not that much about race relations. There's an occasional, like, half a rant that's cut off. But mostly Denzel is teaching him to, like, hey, you got to dress nicer and, you got to smell a little better and be polite to waiters and not be uncomfortable around, slightly different people.
The music underscoring this transformation montage was the worst music I had ever heard in my life.
Oh, it's so
like the music was already
every
bad.
time it's like it hits a low point and it gets lower.
Worse.
Josh, the ending theme of this movie is the worst song I've ever heard in my life. It actively harmed me.
I had to mute the TV to get through the credits.
So restaurant scene. This is up next with this effeminate, bumbling European
we have
waiter.
to talk about the piece. We got to talk about Bob Hoskins' piece.
Oh,
so
God.
they do this montage, and they're getting him a lot of suits. They're getting him, a lot of shoes, and he's basically just doing what Denzel Washington is telling him to do, like pick out this shirt, pick out that shirt. And he is in a barber chair, and the barber is just kind of like combing his hair. He's like, oh, I don't like having my hair combed. And he gets a haircut that results in him having exponentially more hair than when he went into the place. And it's supposed to be played like, oh, if he just styled it differently, he would have a full head of hair. And I'm like, listen, as someone who has hair that could be charitably described as Bob Hoskins-esque, that's not how this works at all. I wish that were how it worked, but he kind of comes out of this looking like Joe Pesci. It's once they put the sunglasses on him and the big suit, it's incredible.
Bob Hoskins, for all of his talents, does not clean up well.
No.
He does not come out of this like,
but that's
wow.
not the point of Bob Hoskins, which is why this casting doesn't make any sense. It's why this whole plot line defies credulity, because he looks like a schlub.
Oh, that's why.
That's his bankability. Yeah, that's the only reason.
Imagine if Chris Farley had played the main part. What kind of movie that would have been?
Honestly, it would have been funnier. There would have been a lot more.
It would have been a lot funnier.
Yeah.
pratfalls.
It's incredible. It's just incredible. It's so bad. It really is.
I think we've all seen a lot of makeover montages in our life.
Sure.
This is the worst one by far.
Far.
Like, that's including TV. That's including sitcoms. This is the worst one.
And I think I do want it to be said that I do kind of miss the era where Bob Hoskins, a person who looks like Bob Hoskins, could actually be the romantic lead of a thing. I feel like we are in a Marvel age right now where everybody has to be absolutely shredded. And if you're not shredded, we have to put you through Marvel boot camp so you can appear on screen.
Kumail Nanjiani, they got him roided up and looking weird.
Where is our Patty Chayefsky to write the new Marty?
What you're definitely not going to get, even then, even if they started using physically different people, you're not going to get an entire movie where they make the star look as awful and unhealthy as possible for the entire time.
That's
sweating,
true.
eating, grimacing.
Absolutely. And I will be honest, I do kind of I don't miss this movie. I don't miss movies like this movie.
You're not going to go watch it again next week, AJ?
No, this is not going to make it into the weekly rotation, but I do miss the weirdness.
Another one that I think is from about the same time is the one with Bronson Pinchot and John Larroquette. And they run a detective agency where Bronson Pinchot is a wacky shaman who can communicate with the spirits.
Oh, boy.
I'll just say
What?
it's a lot worse than this.
That's hard
It's
to imagine.
a lot worse.
Wow.
Michael, you want to come back on and cover that one at some point?
Please no. I've already lost
I'm
enough
banning
sanity
that.
from just watching this alone. I don't know if I can handle watching something
that
worse.
movie is called Second Sight. It came out only 3 months before Heart Condition.
What a world, man.
Really a banner year for cinema across the board. Dear Lord.
And what's incredible is these were not the biggest movies, but these were big movies.
Yeah.
These were like covered everywhere. They were in all the theaters.
This was not an indie. This was New Line Cinema, and fucking Steve Tisch was putting money behind it.
This was the middle of the road. These were the mid-budget, mid-business kinds of movies.
And this kind of movie doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, you get stuff like this every once in a while these days, a movie like, say, Knives Out or something like that, but it's not very common anymore.
Yeah, even on like streaming services, they lean more towards serialized production than, an individual piece. Which means that like all of the fucking garbage that Netflix produces, like Bright or whatever, is extremely expensive, and they can't actually keep that up, especially now. But just one benefit of all this though, no more Bronson Pinchot.
Oh, thank God.
Anyway, AJ, sorry.
No, at the end, I will say, at the end of the montage, I had the one intentional laugh, I think, that I had in the entire movie. They set up this thing where Bob Hoskins, throughout the entire montage, just wants to drink this glass of white wine. He reaches out to grab it, and Denzel's like, no, you just have to pose and get measured for your suit. And then
also your heart, yeah.
Yeah, after he's trying on the suit, he reaches out and Denzel's like, no, you have to protect your heart.
Right.
And then at the very end, he's fully dressed up in the full Pesci. He's walking out.
It's actually the sequel to the Full Monty, the Full Pesci.
I'd watch it. 9 Joe Pesci showing hog. I'm on board. But he reaches over and picks up the wine glass. And then he's about to take a sip, and Denzel's like, yeah, go ahead, take a sip. You deserved it. It's been a long day. He's about to take a sip. He looks over at the price of everything, and he drops the wine glass, and it shatters on the floor.
Yeah, that was just like a classic, like, physical bit.
Yeah, it was a part of the movie that had no dialogue whatsoever. And I think that's what it mostly had going for it.
Coincidentally, Bronson Pinchot is the only person I've ever read saying bad things about Denzel Washington.
Oh, interesting.
What? He apparently hates and says he's a bully and, not sympathetic to him and,
Whoa.
Denzel Washington was very nasty.
Yeah.
To be fair, when they met, they were perfect strangers.
Yeah. And also, you mentioned Joe Pesci, and I was looking around on people's resumes who worked on this movie and the other movies they worked on. And another movie the music guy worked on was one I had forgotten existed until yesterday, which is called With Honors. And it's Joe Pesci as a homeless man who inspires a bunch of Harvard students.
This is the peak of cinema.
Again,
really
Michael, that sounds like something that would be in one of your comics. Like it sounds like one of those ideas where it would be something intentionally sending up the concept, but they did it totally earnestly, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's wild. Wow.
I mean, we have to do that movie at some point. I can't imagine.
There's too many movies in the 90s that are like. I think the most emblematic movie of this era is Heart and Souls, the Robert Downey Jr. vehicle, where he is a baby that was born on the same day that like 5 other people die on a trolley, and then like these ghosts of these people are with him his entire life until he gets to like his teenage years when he goes to get therapy and shock treatment and forgets about them. This is the first 5 minutes of the movie. The rest of the movie is he's now Robert Downey Jr. He's a shithead lawyer, like regarding Henry's situation.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. And all of the souls of these dead people have reemerged and found a way to contact him because they have like a week before they either go to heaven or they just miss the bus forever. Fine. And then Robert Downey Jr. does like an Aunt Jemima routine at some point.
Lord.
Isn't Charles Grodin one of them?
Charles Grodin is one of them.
What?
I think
No way.
Kira Sedgwick is one. Alfre Woodard is the black woman who is one of the ghosts who he does not impersonate well at all because he just goes straight into a minstrel routine.
Oh dear.
And that was 2 years after this. But that's the movie. Whenever I talk about like the era of the 90s and how you could just sort of sell a screenplay and get a movie made, that is like the ultimate one of these movies. And it's amazing how many similar things happen in this exact film.
Well, so
there was a template for it, really. It feels like it was written from a template.
Well, so I followed the resume of the guy who wrote and directed this. This is his one feature.
Right.
But his work does kind of fall into these themes a lot because after this, he produced the show, probably never seen this, but Forever Night, where it was a cop who was a vampire. And
oh my God.
It was one of those syndicated Canadian shows.
Oh, hell yeah.
They used to have,
Like
WGN.
Syndicated Canadian shows back then. This is an authentic memory from the period. And they didn't have a late night talk show on CBS, so they had something they called Crime Time after prime time. And it would be showings of Forever Night, Silk Stockings, which was crimes like on beaches and stuff. And
that's a great like cocaine architecture show.
What's so funny is, we've talked before on this show about New York Undercover, the Fox Network police procedural, which we watched it and it was like a pretty standard-ish police procedural, but
Dick Wolf kind of a thing.
But with some interesting characters and some fun character choices, and compared to that kind of stuff, it sounds downright fucking great. Like you forget just how bad things were in the 90s, and just a dearth of good culture And
speaking of bad things, we get a scene all about Crystal Garrity between Bob Hoskins and Denzel Washington, where Denzel just starts psychoanalyzing Bob Hoskins and saying, like, your life is like all that film you keep in the fishbowl. Hey, remember all that film he keeps in the fishbowl? That's going to be important later.
Like, also, Bob, put that in your refrigerator. Come on, it's expiring.
Yeah. And he's just like, you wanna control people. Like, you don't want anything out of your control. But he does this a lot where he gives him sort of like blanket psychological like evaluation, but then it contradicts itself like almost every other scene.
Well, and this is sort of the thing too, is, you know, it is the number one rule of writing that everybody knows to the point it's become cliche is show, don't tell. And to the extent that we've been shown anything, it's that Bob Hoskins is a slob. He likes burgers, and he throws around racial slurs with abandon. And now we're supposed to be believing that he's like this sensitive guy who, like, you know, he's a little bit hard edged, but ultimately he's got a heart of gold. And literally nothing we have seen up to this point justifies the psychoanalysis that we are hearing whatsoever.
He's very angry for reasons that are never explained.
Yes.
Never.
That's right. There's not even like my dad hit me, or like, you know, like there was there's no past trauma.
He
He's
doesn't have a dad. He doesn't have a dad. He doesn't have a mom. He's a homunculus who just emerged one day out of that burger stand, and said, "I'm a cop." By the way,
he's just an idea of a racist cop. The same way Denzel is, I guess, the idea of a black lawyer, who's not really a lawyer but just a pimp.
So this then carries into the next scene where there is the date. And again,
it just keeps going.
It just keeps going on.
The second act of this movie is longer than both of the other acts. So
they keep trying to get into the drama of these scenes, and it's just through this dialogue that is cyclical. It keeps going on, and it is drowned in the synth because they know they're not selling it. So they're like, this will finally save it. Just play a really long, sustained note on the goddamn synthesizer.
Really long and really loud is the other thing that I would note. The sound mixing is
the levels are
terrible. You know how loud the music is relative to the dialogue? You can't hear half of what they're fucking saying.
They don't want you to hear it.
No.
Besides,
the soundtrack is vocalizing itself all the time, going like,
I love it. We forgot to mention at the beginning of this movie, it's silent for like the first couple seconds, and then you just hear people talking over it, and then that repeats throughout the movie, that there's just a bunch of like, oh, this is gonna be fun,
poorly
in
mixed.
Like slow motion. It's really confusing. Nothing more confusing, I think, than the opening shot of this dinner scene where the smallest lobster I have ever seen in my life is placed very delicately onto a plate, and Bob Hoskins is out of his element. He likes burgers, he likes bourbon, and all of a sudden this, I guess, priest walks up to the table with the silliest accent you've ever heard in your life, because it's not a real accent. I'm pretty sure
it's Italian or Norwegian.
Performance,
It's absolutely bizarre. And again, like thinking about like, well, what would a version of this movie look like that was good? You would find somebody who is actually able to make strong choices that are funny. You would find like, you know, this would be like Steve Martin or something like that.
Yeah, this would be like where you get John Leguizamo.
Sure,
right?
Sure,
absolutely. Well, it feels a little. It actually feels. I feel bad for the guy in this scene because he's actively sweating. He clearly has like a stutter going on, and he's very nervous about delivering all these specials. And they're openly laughing at him.
Do you think these were just really hot sets, or were they actually spraying these people down between takes?
Hard to say.
You have to be intentionally sweating.
Giving them all cocaine between shots.
The ginger root sauce. He sounds like Jared Leto in the Gucci movie.
Oh yeah, House of Gucci.
Yeah, no, the Gucci movie. It's the Disney film.
Can't wait for the sequel, an extremely Gucci movie when you go to the X Games.
That's one we should talk about.
It's just Adam Driver's corpse on a skateboard going up and down a ramp.
So, ultimately,
how are we still on this date?
I don't know. We gotta get out of here. But it's also worth noting that this is what it feels like. This is what this movie feels like all the time. Listeners, if you are frustrated that we keep getting stuck, That's what watching this movie feels like.
So we start on the date. We start at the date in the fancy place, and Denzel Washington is like masturbating over like all like the amazing food that he's gonna have there. And Bob Hoskins
this is the scene that the Frighteners did much better.
Bob Hoskins gets nervous midway through. He goes to the bathroom. He locks himself in a stall and screams, "I'm not gonna blow it!" And there's a guy outside who's like,
I don't even remember
Chloe Webb is very impressed that Bob Hoskins knows what Evian is.
She's also very impressed that his suit is slightly better than it usually has been.
And she's very impressed by his horrible hairpiece.
But yeah, they go back to the hotel. They have sex.
Yep.
Well, they first go to a pool hall, remember, Brian?
No, they don't.
Okay. And they fight each other with
care
sticks.
what else they do. They have a problem. It's irreconcilable, and she ends up leaving again.
That's exactly right.
That's all that happens. It's the only thing that ever happens. But they have to get past it.
They bond over the next door neighbor whose name is Mrs. Arcadian, and she's Mrs. Arcadian the Armenian.
How do you remember this?
Because I took note of Mrs. Arcadian the Armenian, because it's like, I guess it's
his favorite song from The Music Man.
Michael, I want to bring you back into the conversation right now, but I honestly don't know how.
What are your thoughts on Mrs. Arcadian the Armenian?
Shut up, AJ. Shut the fuck up, AJ. Shut up. Fuck you.
Have they had the discussion yet where Denzel is like, you got to listen to her? What's her favorite?
That happens before the date.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is also really weird. Like, that's not how it works either. People aren't like, oh, he remembers my pet back home. Okay.
Yeah, no.
You know, he's a good listener.
Yeah, and he even feeds Bob Hoskins like one incorrect fact.
Yeah, her favorite movie, which he says is Pinocchio, but it turns out to be The Parent Trap.
Right.
Very similar sounding films.
Right.
We all big fans of Haley Mills.
It's like it's just all this stuff that seems to be signifying that something is going to happen, and then just nothing happens.
Well, Denzel Washington does watch Bob Hoskins have sex with Chloe Webb, and
which he will do for the rest of Bob Hoskins' life.
That's a good point.
That is true. I mean,
Apparently
spoilers.
He's just kind of a pervert.
He just wants to hang around.
Right. You ever hang around the gym?
Like, it's really hard. It is really hard to think of any other ghost movies where there's like no reason for the ghost to be there.
Right.
He has some interest, I guess, in solving his murder.
But it's not very active. He doesn't really seem
by the way,
to care.
folks, remember how much time they spent at the beginning on the dead senator?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up again. I mean,
it does come back later, but it's like there's the entire
really
second
mysterious.
Yeah, it's very mysterious. What could have happened to the
what's the crime? Who's the guilty party?
Right.
What's going on?
Right. Could it be the evil man with the big cell phone?
All we really know at this point.
All crimes are being done by that one guy with the cell phone.
That is true.
Yeah.
Even in that scene with his mom, where his mom's like, my son is trash, there is actually like true love there and like gravitas from him. And anytime that the script like allows him to act that way, the movie improves exponentially. None more so than when we get into this fight the next morning where Denzel's like, you have to question Chloe Webb about what happened the night I died.
Yeah, and that just doesn't go over well.
Mm-mm.
And she
flees.
leaves, and that's going to set up pretty much the back third of this movie, more or less, because from here, some more plot's going to happen.
You know what, Josh? That plot?
Yeah.
I think it's going to happen after our break.
I would like for it to happen after our break.
Greetings, connoisseurs of ear-based entertainment. It is I, Lord Bartholomew Badgerby, a member of the landed gentry and local sports correspondent for the BBC, the British Badger Corporation. Here to cordially invite you to the next rousing Badger game, happening in a fortnight's time at the Wii Sports Arena located behind the gazebo in scenic Badgerton, England. Come bear witness to some of the top players in the Premier Badger League, including Heath Badger, Badgermain Clement, and local favorite Dan the Badger, whose sprawling athleticism has captured the heart of every Badgertonian since... Listeners, I have been handed startling news. Dan the Badger has quite suddenly passed away. He was struck in the head by a wayward badger ball and did not recover. He is survived by no immediate family. A memorial service will be held at the Wii Sports Arena this weekend for any and all who wish to pay their respects. I'm sorry. This is... Dan wasn't just a preeminent athlete, he was also a dear friend. I hadn't spoken to him in years. He was always so busy traveling, I always thought we would... We met at university. We were from very different worlds. He was there on scholarship. I was there because my father made a few calls. It aided me, always. I felt like an imposter, but that never mattered to Dan. He was so self-possessed and assured that if he chose to make you his friend, it meant that maybe there was something in you worth loving. A memory stirs. It's autumn. I'm at some party at Kappa Badger Pie, drowning the sorrows of our school's loss at the hands of Came Badge, when I suddenly realize that Dan is nowhere in sight. I search and find him, sitting alone on the roof of the burrow, staring up at the night sky. I ask him if he is all right, tell him it was a real shame about the game, how beautiful it was to watch him play, as always. He doesn't make eye contact with me. It's clear he's been crying. He just stares up at the stars as we sit in silence. Then, after a time, more to himself than to me, he says, "There will always be another game. There will always be another game." The only thing that brings me comfort, dear listeners, is that even though Dan's lost this one, there will always be another game. And I can't wait to see him play it. For the British Badger Corporation, this is Lord Bartholomew Badgerby saying, Godspeed, Dan the Badger. Godspeed.
So here's a minor sampler of what else was going on in the 90s. This is excluding like the big stuff. This is a lot of like I'm just looking at the mid-grade. So we had stuff like Quigley Down Under.
Oh my God, Quigley Down Under.
Pretty good by comparison, yeah.
Yeah, the sequel to Look Who's Talking.
That was Look Who's Talking Now?
2.
Or Look Who's Talking 2?
Yeah, Now is the third one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. John Patrick Shanley's movie Joe versus the Volcano,
Which rules. Yeah. Well, the first two thirds.
Good, yeah.
The first two thirds of that movie rule, and then the third part is not very good.
My Blue Heaven, which has its moments. That was a movie that got turned down by Arnold Schwarzenegger because he took Kindergarten Cop instead. Hell yeah.
Smart man.
And then like Awakenings, which is a fantastic movie. This is what's on offer in 1990. Okay. Just in sort of the vague sense. These are
State
the kind
of Grace, which was an incoherent, bellowing mess.
What was the Academy Award winner this year for Best Picture?
Dances with Wolves is the winner.
Oh boy, real banner 2 years for the Oscars. Holy shit.
Awakenings, Ghost, The Godfather Part 3, and Goodfellas. Imagine Goodfellas fucking losing in that category.
Lost Dancing with Wolves?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Kevin Costner had so much power. You don't understand. Like before Weinstein turned the whole system over, I feel like Costner had everyone's balls in a vice grip.
Speaking of balls in a vice grip.
Wait, no, we're still talking about the Oscars here. Not just yet. Because I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this movie anymore. So, the Best Actor winner was Jeremy Irons in Reversal of Fortune, where he played Klaus von Bülow, the movie about how great Alan Dershowitz is.
Nice.
Dear God.
Then Kathy Bates won for Misery this year. So it's Goodfellas, it's Ghost, it's Misery, it's Dances with Wolves. Yeah. Best foreign film is Journey of Hope, which was Swiss. I've never heard of it. But if it's Swiss, it's probably pretty good.
Brian.
What?
we have to talk about the movie now.
We do.
I'm so sorry.
I don't want to do it either, but like we have to.
It's a Journey of Hope is a co-production, actually. It's Swiss and Turkish. They shot it in Turkey.
We got to do this. Your mom and I have been talking, and we're really worried about you.
I don't want to come back.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll get through it. After this hour, you know what? Michael's going to go take us for ice cream.
Yeah, you got it. Van Leeuwen.
Oh, wow. Big spender, Michael. Let's go.
No, actually, my son's been making me take him to this. There's this chain now where you get like a fish pancake cone with custard at the bottom or red bean paste.
Oh.
And then it's got ice cream in it. There's one in Williamsburg now. There's one in...
What's it called?
I can't remember the name. He swears it's a Sanrio company.
Oh, okay.
So is this when we go to the beach? Is this the beach scene?
So okay, let's.
Yes.
We're almost
to the beach. We're almost to the beach, Brian. We're almost there.
Oh God! When the movie gets serious,
Sam, I will meet you on the beach.
I'm getting lost in my own notes right now. That's how bad this is.
There's a very convoluted turn here where Bob Hoskins is put on desk duty that we've referred to before.
Yes, right. Because he
he has to go back to the station.
Because
at some
also
point.
everybody else, getting out of the hotel, he gets busted by his colleagues because they're worried about his mental health. They don't realize that it's to do with his heart condition. They think that something is going on in his head.
He's talking to somebody who isn't there. He's behaving very erratically.
Right.
doing slapstick.
Right.
Yeah.
So
he's screaming in the office in the police station like to no one.
You've been diagnosed with slapstick.
So he goes back to his apartment, and by the way, to the point of like how just the material conditions of the 90s that we were talking about earlier. His apartment is so big. He has this
it's enormous.
Huge fucking apartment.
Huge.
And he's supposed to be like, it's really kind of implied that like he's not broke, but he's not doing great either.
No,
but
he just got passed up for promotion. Remember, it's promotion week. This whole thing takes place during promotion week.
Savings on his makeover,
and on bottles of Jim Beam
I think that was the bowling alley money because he had no money.
Yeah.
So that's what the bowling alley money was for. It was like
that's
$200K.
what tipped the cops that something weird was going on.
But
that $200K
but
has
that's
now
deeply
been
illegal. And if they actually investigated him and found that he suddenly had $150,000,
well, there's even a throwaway
that he stole from hip hop bowling.
There's even a throwaway line in there that he buys a car with cash. He buys like a $60,000 Ferrari with cash.
Yeah.
And when I say with cash, I don't mean like from the bank. I mean with actual cash.
So his boss basically lays it down on the line and says, "Hey, I didn't want to take you back. I was made to take you back. I think you're a racist piece of shit. And also, tomorrow morning you are going to be evaluated, and if you are found to be cuckoo banana pants, we are shipping you off to a mental institution." So now we have a deadline, right? We have, a ticking clock, as it were. Finally, I'm going to gun to my head. I can't tell you how he gets to the beach. He does detective work to figure out that there is like a sort of tar on the bottom of Crystal's heel.
Because he finally developed one of the rolls of film, and because there was something in one of those photos.
I didn't even remember he'd actually developed
He
the
noticed
film.
something in one of the photos that led him to realize that Crystal would be on the beach. It doesn't make sense, but whatever. Now we're on the beach. He meets her up on the beach.
Also just like the beach.
Yeah.
In California.
Also, Denzel Washington says, "Oh, it can't be this easy." And I guess I don't think that was in the script. I think it was just Denzel giving notes mid-scene.
So I want to read now real quick my notes verbatim from what happens next. Straight from here.
This beach scene is ooh.
All right, so here we go. He tails his girlfriend back to the beach. Well, not girlfriend, but
his ex.
Whatever.
His ex, whatever. Who cares? Who fucking cares? But so she starts melting down. She just completely starts melting down. She's like, you can't follow me here. You can't do this. And this is a very strange performance. And again, this is just reading verbatim from my notes. This performance is so strange. It's one of the weirdest performances of fear/grief I've ever seen. And oh my God, she had Denzel Washington's baby.
My entire note for this, for probably this half-hour chunk of the movie was just, now there's a baby.
Yeah.
Denzel's got a son.
And it's
a baby who gets put through some shit in a way
Oh, man.
absolutely 1,000% could not do now.
They
would
Battleship
not let
Potemkin level shit.
But it's upsetting. It's actually upsetting.
It is.
Yeah.
And there's this really bizarre, like, the way that the baby is established is bizarre. Like, it's just kind of like revealed that
Who do you care for?
she has this baby, and this baby is black, and so that means that it's and then Denzel Washington has a whole thing where it's like, oh, I have a baby. And again, I think for what the thing is, he plays it pretty nicely. He plays it in the way that a man seeing his son would
get leaden. Yeah.
Exactly. He gets the big bucks. He can sell
absolutely.
Yeah, but
anything.
This moment had the biggest unintentional laugh of the entire movie.
I laughed
for me.
so hard.
Because Denzel Washington sees this child and Chloe Webb says, I had a baby. And it cuts back to Denzel Washington, and he just mouths the word baby.
How did Denzel not know that she was pregnant?
Yeah, that
takes a while.
For 3 months. Yeah, she was pregnant for 3 months before he died.
Wait. She was pregnant
hold
for 3
on.
months before he died?
Yes.
That much time has not passed.
That doesn't make sense. This baby.
No, because you missed something. Because at the hospital, he had that scene where he shouted at the surgeon. You took it out. You put it in, take it out.
Right.
And then they cut to a therapist saying, after the 8 months of physical therapy you've just had.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
Yeah. Also, he was under for
wow.
3 weeks, so it's been a significant amount of time since Denzel Washington's death.
I've noticed that this.
I mean, that's also not. I mean, that's like an almost a year-old child, but
I'm glad that
it's crazy. Why would the people who did the crime even be living there now? It's just ridiculous. Like, no one's moved since it happened, and they're all just standing around, literally at the end of the movie.
So we'll run through
you're
that.
gonna leave a house like that?
We'll run through that in a moment. But one thing that I wanted to ask, Michael, is your comics, some of them are very attuned to what I would say is like intentionally cheesy setups and like the cliches of strange or bad, writing in a movie context, like this kind of stuff,
like
right?
Hollywood.
You have an eye for Hollywood, weird Hollywood tropes, the things that they do, the strange sort of like corners that they cut for the sake of expediency. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to that, because it seems like that might be part of why you find this particular movie so interesting.
Well, yeah, I think I did grow up, I grew up in the 70s, 80s. I was almost grown up by the 90s, but it was an era of culture where there was a lot of self-contradictory stuff going on and just a lot of, odd misfiring, I think Hollywood really, really changed. The entertainment industry really has changed since then. So you can't just bumble around, and go like, fisherman turns robot, and get $3 million to make your movie or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think the ridiculousness of so much that was made back then really had an effect. Yeah.
And I don't know if it gets any more ridiculous than Denzel Washington screaming the N-word so hard in Bob Hoskins' face that he literally kills him.
Oh, right. I forgot the second heart
Well, and
attack.
it's not even the N-word. He starts going into like different slurs for other ethnicities.
Yeah. Yep. He ends it with a string of 3 N-words in a row. But yeah, no, there's the build
like
up
the writer
to it
was
is
like,
a lot of...
I just saw Do the Right Thing. I really liked that scene. I'm going to work this in here.
Yep.
And then Hoskins has a second heart. He got a shit heart, first of all. So he has a second heart attack.
But just to establish again why this is supposed to matter, at this point, the woman is in peril, as is the baby. The other pimp, I think,
baby in danger.
That guy, the other pimp who's now the guy who is hiring her out,
villain,
the soap opera villain, who by the way
he
has a real guy cell phone man would be his Hideo Kojima name. He has a real 90s face. He's like the ultimate 90s man. And if Bob Hoskins does not liberate her in time, he's going to do something.
He's going to inject her with heroin so it looks like an overdose.
Oh, that's right.
That's the only way they kill anyone as the drug men is by giving them bad drugs.
Right.
Yeah, and they don't just go ahead and do it. They're like, put it on the calendar. This is imminent. You know, first we've got to move her from what seemed like an exterior shot of a nice beach house into a haunted beach house where we'll stand around.
It's the beach house where like the Chechen separatists took over.
It actually it vaguely looks like the background of every Christian rock song that came out in the 90s.
It's the background of a DC Talk music video.
Yes, it is. Yeah, just the whole time that scene's going on, you just hear colored people.
It's so odd. It's so odd. And it's just like, it's like in all this entertainment, back then, it's like crime is like a liminal space. It's like you're on the beach, that's where there's crime and, you know.
Well, this goes back to the really sort of thing that you had said earlier about with like Miami Vice and how like crime and all that thing, it's like a vibe. It's like a vibe that you feel and you kind of like, these are crime vibes, man. Like this part of the beach has crime vibes to it. Crimes are going to happen. Why?
Yeah, because when you look at the mechanics of what they're doing, it's like, what was going on? Why do they have to cover up that the senator was using cocaine? Like who cares?
That's
who's
the whole
paying them.
That's the whole point of killing someone through the drugs. Is that's like the perfect way to disguise it, and there's no way anyone can be like, oh boy, it was certainly the dealer poisoned them. It's just like, he did cocaine and he died.
Yeah, there's never any like selling drugs or like you don't see any actual mechanics of crime. It's just people.
Yeah, it's
dying of drugs. Yeah,
if the drugs were laced, it's not as if they could go back and perform an autopsy. He's been in the ground for 8 months.
Yeah, and but also
isn't that what they in fact do? Don't they go? Do they
don't check for drugs. They don't even check for drugs in the original autopsy.
It's that they figured out they never did a toxicology report.
That they tried to bury it because he was a family values senator.
Let's go ahead and finish up what happens here.
I thought they were saying they hadn't done the toxicology on Denzel. See, I was just gone at this point. I was I was on my phone.
Very confusing. That's what I'm saying. This movie defies understanding. It like shimmers and shifts in front of you. The language is all like circular. And,
the brief moment where like the rookie is the point man who discovers they didn't do. They hadn't done the toxicology test.
I'm not supposed to take that autopsy report out, but here it is.
He gets the call and he goes into the files. I thought that he was a mole. I thought that was the whole thing that was going on.
That's more interesting than what it is.
That wasn't what was happening.
So here's the thing that's happening to me right now. I keep looking at my notes and it's almost like when you are reading things in a dream and the letters are rearranging themselves on the page. My brain cannot make sense of what is going on right now and my own notes have become unintelligible to me.
I think this movie isn't a text. I believe it is an entity. I believe there is a profound evil living at the center of this movie, and the more we try to understand it, and the closer we get to the center of the labyrinth, the more we realize that the Minotaur has been behind us the whole time, and there's just a never-ending spiral down into hell.
Yeah, this movie is basically an SCP.
The only way that I think all of us together, because this actually is starting to feel like a quest.
That it's like an SCP. It's like an SCP that Francis Fukuyama wrote.
Yeah, I think the only way we can do it is just to get through this final act as quickly as possible. And
agreed.
We wake up with Bob Hoskins not dead, but in fact in a bed on life support.
Right.
With Denzel Washington telling him that was a lot of excitement. Maybe next time we do bumper cars because that's going to solve the racism.
Right.
Bob Hoskins then tries to call everyone he knows in order to try and get somebody to go and save Crystal.
Get a really nice series of one-sided phone calls there.
I wrote this, baby hostage, hostage baby.
And so the final showdown, the final ultimatum is he needs to bring the photos, which are incriminating for a reason that is never fully explained, to the drop-off point. The drop-off point being the aforementioned Chechen beach house.
So weird, where they're all just standing around, like
just twiddling their thumbs.
So he's got to go there.
Nothing.
He's got to go there, and he's got to bring the photos and drop them off in order for them to not kill her by poisoning her with too much heroin, which they are going to forcibly inject into her body.
And she can't escape because there's maybe 4 guards.
Right.
Yes, and she's holding the baby.
It's not a particularly bustling place.
And by the way, he only has 40 minutes to do this.
For some reason.
He hijacks a police car from the hospital and just peels the fuck out. So finally, we get to the final scene here in this house that, again, like I thought looks like a level from either Hitman or Splinter Cell or something along those lines. This has real video game level vibes, and it feels like a video game level because he has to clear
the video game Siren. You use your special seeing powers from beyond the dead to see where all of the henchmen are before you get to them.
Yeah, he has to clear the NPCs, and he has to do it through stealth. This feels like a stealth game.
So he starts blasting. Bob Hoskins has a fucking shotgun.
Double barrel pump action shotgun.
That is as big as he is. And it's also fascinating because the bad guy, when he sees Bob Hoskins arrive, he tells them to inject Crystal with half the dose.
yeah.
Instead of just actually just doing it, he's like, give her half.
And to the point earlier about how, like, you know, again, they would not allow a baby to just like an actual baby to be around for something like this.
No, well, and especially like this baby was on set for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's harrowing because the baby is quite upset.
Yeah, like actually
not
upset.
having a good time.
Yeah.
You can have these days. Babies can be on set for, I think, 12 minutes.
Oh, really?
A day.
Yeah. Well, it's so many loud explosions happening around this kid. I can only imagine how how terrifying it must have been.
Because
it's the most emotion you see from anyone in the entire movie. Is
That's
that baby.
true. That's true. It all culminates with Bob Hoskins gets shot. In the shoulder.
Not before tossing out a smoke grenade and firing off a couple shots of his own, of course.
Yes, and he then has to not carry per se, but like stand kind of awkwardly in front of Crystal as she's very high on heroin and has this baby, and they have to get out of the building. And Denzel Washington is just kind of going around like putting his hands vaguely near people and just like trying to lift them up. By the way, the amount of extras in this movie who like dead on look Denzel Washington in the face, it's incredible. And like track him with their eye
There's
movement.
always people clocking him on set.
Absolutely.
It's hilarious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And they make their way into the bathroom and they find a drop, and the stakes could not be higher because they have to drop down a whole 5 feet.
Right.
I love that Denzel drops first. Like, he still should be the point man for the guys with guns in the building. But he's like, hey, watch me jump down and follow me.
The rules of ghosts are weird in this movie, too, because wouldn't he just, like, plummet through the floor? Because ghosts are supposed to float because they're kind of existing kind of in the
so
air.
Obviously, you haven't seen Ghost Dad. It's really only carpets and rugs that happens with.
No, I remember.
Very clear.
What was a movie you mentioned earlier with Robert Downey Jr.? It was...
Heart and Souls, yeah.
Yeah. I remember that because PBS did a at the movies special on the incredible special effects.
Oh, hell yeah.
Of Heart and Souls.
Oh, dear
like
God.
how they disguised the wires when the 5 ghosts were like flying over a bridge or something.
Wow.
So special effects were not
What was
where
the
they
deal
are
with
now.
ghosts in the like early 90s? What was that?
Well, and Ghosts came out this same year.
Wait, before or after this movie?
I'm sure after. It was probably closer to awards season. This movie was dumped out at the beginning of February.
I think the thing that I actually think is the biggest missed opportunity is on the poster of this film. It shows Bob Hoskins reaching his hand and putting it up against a wall, but it's going through Denzel Washington, and there aren't any of those kind of effects in this movie.
No, they don't do any ghost things at all.
Well,
There are no ghost shenanigans.
He also,
aside from a
because
crossfade here and there.
that isn't the kind of ghost that he is. He is, in fact, at least to Bob Hoskins, fully corporeal. He has the ability to manipulate him. You can't just like move through him. Anyway,
Denzel might not have wanted to play a horny ghost where he's always like, excuse me, peeping out the girls' locker room, you know.
Oh, no, absolutely.
he's what was that movie?
Sitting in a chair watching Bob Hoskins just get railed.
What was that Kevin Bacon movie where he was invisible and used that to be like
Hollow
a creepy
Man.
sex pest? Yeah.
Hollow Man, but that's an H.G. Wells. That's just a remake of like the Invisible Man.
Right.
That one's not a ghost. It's science fiction-y horror kind of thing.
Anyway, let's please wrap this up.
So yeah, I don't know. Everyone was just like, put a ghost in it.
Yeah.
I guess it sold for a while.
Well, again, I was looking at the guy who wrote and directed this, and the next thing he did actually was a pilot for a series that was not picked up from an Anne Rice idea, and it was called Rag and Bone, TV movie, 1998.
Was a ghost
with
involved?
with Dean Cain and Robert Patrick. The life of a priest seconded to a New Orleans police department begins to fall apart when he is wrongly implicated in the shooting of a suspect. However, it comes to light that the precinct is haunted by the spirit of a deceased policeman who helps the beleaguered cleric to solve the case and clear his name.
I know I've said I'm going to become the Joker, but I feel like I'm going to become the Joker again.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse when I say this, but like every single one of these synopses sounds like something that would be in one of those like Thrizzle volumes that you wrote a while back, Michael. Like it's just, oh my God.
It's almost a 30 Rock bit.
So Bob Hoskins is about to go out the window, and bad guy cell phone man appears, and guess what? His cell phone goes off, alerting Bob Hoskins. This Chekhov's cell phone, and he turns around and shoots the bad guy, but not before the bad guy gets one last shot off on Bob Hoskins. Bob Hoskins falls out the window, rolls down into the sand.
It's the one thing that has payoff in this whole movie is the cell phone.
It's true.
Yep,
it's true.
At that point, anything is possible. I'm like, maybe the dildo's gonna come back.
Right.
Crystal and the baby hold Bob Hoskins as a helicopter flies in, but it's sort of this very Jesus in the arms of his mother shot, and it's gonna be like oh God, Bob Hoskins sacrificed himself so that these two could live and maybe the next generation go on. We cut to a church with the morning bells pealing, and you're like, oh, we're going to see the funeral. It's going to be so devastating. It's a marriage. He's fine.
Yeah.
Bob Hoskins is fine.
They faked you out, guys. It's
They tricked you. And guess who came to the wedding? Guess who came to the wedding? Bubba. That guy from the hip hop bowling
character in the movie.
Everybody from the hip hop bowling alley shows up.
I just want to know how he smoothed that over with Bubba specifically. Like,
Archimedes, I don't know.
Yes, I took $200,000 and I hit you, but your brother is inside me and he made me do it.
And they all gather outside. The worst song that I've ever heard in my life begins to play, called "Have a Heart." Which I think I'm so mad I'm shaking even reading it.
Yeah. We should play this episode out with that song, Brian.
Yeah, we should do a freeze frame.
So
that podcast freeze frame
is actually being performed by Bonnie Raitt, and it was written by, I don't know who Bonnie Hayes is, but I guess she wrote songs.
What if it's
sometimes.
just Bonnie Raitt, but like under a pen?
Under a pen name.
I'm not Bonnie Raitt. I'm Bonnie Hayes.
Yeah. Alan Smithy.
So they all get together for a final photo. Hoskins has his arm weird, and his partner's like, "Hey, why is his arm weird?" And the other rookie cop goes, "Nah, it must be because of his heart condition."
That's the title of the movie.
He's got his arm around Denzel Washington and is looking at him with love and respect.
Yeah, and it's a black and white
right
photo.
Before that. Yeah, where he's holding the baby and holding it affectionately close to him. So
and
it's clear that his
N-word into his ear.
racism has been cured. But it's like there's supposed to be a transition that's taken place where his racism has been cured. That's kind of implied.
Yeah, that's
but we never saw it.
His heart condition actually has been cured.
With a shotgun.
Colored people.
Ultimately, what is racism but a heart condition? And I actually think, by the way, that is the message of this movie. To the extent that it has a message. It goes back to the thing of like racism being a matter first and foremost of personal bigotry. And ultimately, if we just all got to know each other a little bit better, we wouldn't be racist anymore.
Does Bob Hoskins have a job at the end of this movie? Like, is he a cop again, or?
Yeah, because he was proven right because of the drug deal somehow.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was that house full of those men standing around. That's all you needed.
He just went in his capacity. His capacity as a private citizen, he went and just shot a couple of guys, and then it's just like,
It's all going off the testimony of Crystal Garrity, though, now that I'm thinking about it. And cops notoriously don't really trust sex workers particularly much. So, yeah, you know what? Fuck it. He has a job. His racism's cured. I don't want to think about this.
Maybe he's at the
anymore.
bowling alley now. Maybe he's at the hip hop bowling.
Maybe. Maybe he's the pin setter in the back.
Oh, there we go. That's a good job.
Bob Hoskins was such an amazing performer, but I don't think he vetted his scripts very carefully, especially during this period. When was the Mario Brothers movie?
A few years after this.
Yeah, apparently he didn't know it was a apparently he didn't know it was based on a video game when he signed up for it.
He did not, no.
And then I found a quote from him recently where he's like, morons, they were idiots, cruisers who thought they were on tour.
I think he went to his death regretting one thing, and that was the Mario movie, and somehow not this.
Yeah, no, he was very proud of this one.
Yeah, the Mario movie is better than this. I have to say.
Yeah. It's infinitely more interesting, and Dennis Hopper gives a bone-chilling performance. Also,
I disagree, but it is watchable.
It's got sets, it's got characters.
Yeah, it has a plot that makes kind of sense.
No, not really.
Not really. That was a stretch. I felt myself stretching.
It's so wacky and outlandish that you just have to delight in how misconceived it is. Whereas this movie, you have to be an incredibly damaged person to watch it more than once.
So, Michael, thank you for coming on the show. We're very happy.
It's like how Harry Shearer described The Day the Clown Cried. It's like it's like a painting of Auschwitz on black velvet.
Right.
It's just like the worst taste possible in every dimension.
Yes. And I think that the reason too that like you can take something like, again, Mario Brothers movie that makes a lot of bad creative choices, but like there's something entertaining about it because the stakes are very low and it's not dealing with anything that's like real or matters. Whereas there's something about this movie in the way that it's attempting to grapple with a number of very real societal problems, including but not limited to sex work and, the overcriminalization, policing of sex work, racism.
Here's where I'll say, I don't think it's really trying to grapple with the problems as problems so much as these are easy shorthand things that you put in a movie script.
Sure.
And again, this guy just wanted to have a shootout. He wanted to have a hostage baby. He wanted to have a makeover sequence. He wanted to have a ghost and a racist cop. It all just starts to like mash together because it's just stuff that happens in other movies.
But I think that's what makes it feel so offensive, right? Because if you are dealing with this subject matter, you need to treat it with the gravity and respect that it deserves. Otherwise, it just feels... It feels
but
bad.
it was 1990. It was over then. It stopped.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's true.
Well, the thing also is that the characters in this movie are constantly referencing that what's happening to them is like what happens in other better movies. So there's a bit where it's just like, there's as much intrigue as in that Redford picture. Or like at another point, it's just like, there's like a drug ring, like in that movie with the, and they just never mention the movie because he trails off and is cut off. But it's like, it is a movie that is so desperately trying to be any movie that it isn't, and it ends up feeling maddening to try and dive into it because it not only is there they're there, but when you dive into it, you hit concrete immediately. Yeah, like there's no pool. It's a sidewalk. You're diving into a sidewalk.
I took so much psychic damage attempting to just recap this thing because we just kept getting stuck. And that's what watching this movie feels like too. And Michael, I am enjoying watching you laugh at our misfortune because you have cursed us with this horrible, horrible thing.
Yeah, well, the first time I watched it, I think it was with my wife, and we were, and we were both like, "What the fuck was that?" That was really something. And then it just kind of stuck in my mind, for a while until I was like, I gotta go back and see that again because it was just what was going on there. Denzel Washington is an amazing actor. I was kind of going through his catalog, and he's made a wide variety of films. Like to contrast with this would be Devil with a Blue Dress, which is really well plotted and really strong. Yeah, and he's fantastic in it. He's good in everything he does, but some of the movies he's done are just. I think this was actually ranked the worst by Vulture, which makes sense. Yeah. But the other one I mentioned that I also suggested as a possibility was the one from 10 years earlier, where he's George Siegel's son who shows up.
Yes, Carbon Copy.
Carbon Copy, yeah.
I mean, it's a very similar movie in kind of its basic setup. It's where it's just like, it's not so much like, let's make fun of the racism here. It's like, isn't it so wacky that this guy has a black son?
Oh, I just got the title.
Very weird.
Oh, fuck, that title sucks.
Yeah. When you realize, like when you go back to like, Carbon Paper, And then you're like, oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
So
it's embarrassing. It's weird because it does actually show like every white character being very racist, including George Segal, who, Denzel Washington comes and he's like, I'm your son. And he's kind of like written to be like a wise ass teenager, but he's still Denzel Washington. And George Segal treats him like a cockroach that has learned to talk and is, there talking at him. He's just like full of contempt.
You can't do that, like
just shut up. Yeah, no. Denzel's paid his dues repeatedly.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question I have for you, Michael. This movie, the urban legend around it is that it scared Denzel Washington off of doing a comedy for the next 20 years. He didn't do.
The material is so bad that, because I do think he does have a good sense of. Like he can be light, certainly. He most of what he does dramatically is very, very heavy because that's, what his wheelhouse is.
It's what he chooses to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I think the 80s, you had a lot of stuff. He was doing stuff that was more, that wasn't as heavy. It was, he was doing more kind of blockbuster pictures, like The Mighty Quinn. As well as things like Glory. But then he found his lane. He found the kind of movies that he wanted to do. Right. And he became the Denzel Washington. And it was like, this is what I'm going to do.
And it's hard to say because, without having really good material to work with, it's hard to know whether or not somebody is funny. I can't tell, honestly, whether Denzel Washington could have had the comic chops to be like a, John C. Reilly type where he can just do both effortlessly, or if he ultimately can stand up and present in a way that is, fun, but maybe not funny, because those two things are very different from each other. You know what I mean?
I think that's like what Much Ado About Nothing is. It's more fun than funny.
Right.
Yes. And he's the best part of that movie. Yeah. But it's because it's a character with a light touch, and Denzel is like a master of the light touch. But I'm looking at Hoskins, I'm looking at the other movies he did right around this time. He was averaging 2 movies a year. Right.
Yeah.
Which
is
crazy.
Working.
I mean, 1988, 2 movies, 1989, 1 movie, 1990, 2 movies, 1991, 4 movies, 1992, 2 movies, 93, 3 movies. He was just really, really pumping it out. And so you get things like Who Framed Roger Rabbit in 88. You get Heart Condition. You get Hook, which was very disappointing at the time that it came out, but the generation that grew up with it ended up liking it a lot. Yeah. And his performance in Hook is amazing.
No, it's incredible. He gets to use his authentic accent, which is always nice to see, because he really tried to cover it up with being like this very hard cop. I think it's a little better in his other films than it is in Heart Condition. I think, Michael, you referenced that earlier, but it's just like
his idea of being American is just kind of growling a lot.
Kind of like Hugh Laurie as House.
Well, it sets a precedent too, because Cumberbatch comes around for Stephen Strange and he does this Hugh Laurie voice, and it seems as though the easiest shortcut for a Brit to do an American accent is just to put it really down here, because it makes you focus on your R's in a very intense way.
Yeah, the mistake the British make with an English accent is when they go for the R's too hard. You're my dear wife, Julia.
My dear,
I like Julia.
Then they just sound like they're from Yorkshire.
Succession, and the guy on that, Matthew McFadyen.
Yeah,
I've only seen doing stiff upper lip English stuff before.
Yeah,
he's amazing.
Oh, he's phenomenal.
His American accent is incredible.
I conversely was introduced to him in Succession, and my mind was blown when I found out that he is not, in fact, American.
Yeah. Michael, do you have anything you want to plug?
Not so much. I'm working on revamping some artwork for They Might Be Giants album I did 20 years ago.
Oh, fantastic.
They're putting it out on vinyl. That's really exciting.
Cool.
I'm working on a graphic novel. Actually, it's about a movie star who gets frozen now and wakes up 1,000 years in the future and becomes an undercover cop. But part of the idea in it is kind of, inspired by all this stuff, by everything in popular culture that is about crime, because as I was writing it, I was finding it a very funny idea to just have him be going, oh, wait, by the way, what is crime? What is crime? And not getting an answer. And just heading towards the idea that crime is actually just like a manifestation of some idea of duality that man has, that we, kind of cast a spectrum and deem part of it to be crime. So
that's very exciting.
Additionally, if people are interested in, your current work, stuff that you've published in the past, is there anything that you'd recommend folks check out?
Yeah, it's all good.
When Denzel Washington sneezes,
he's very good, folks.
Oh, thanks.
Does he sneeze inside Bob Hoskins' heart?
There should have been shots of him inside the heart. Yeah,
Ooh.
like a small Denzel,
just
in his left ventricle.
The tiniest Denzel Washington. Boy, here he is, stuck inside of an aorta. Oh no!
If he had some furniture in there, like he's got a little hotel room set up inside Bob Hoskins' heart.
I mean, I think it really does reflect the weird thing where everyone was like, racism is dead in the 90s, but they couldn't stop writing about it, right? Yeah. Everything was always dealing with, and specifically anti-black racism, while pretending at the same time, now it's minimal, now it's nothing. The police chief is black and he's going to laugh at you if you say the N-word. But it's still just like, here's the easiest point of friction that we can bring into our story is racism. It's not just this guy has a ghost in his heart. It's that he has a black ghost in his heart. Yes. It's not that this guy discovered that he has an illegitimate son who's now a teenager. It's that he discovered he has a black son who is a teenager.
Yeah.
And so even though everyone is singing it's over, they have to keep saying it's over because they have to keep convincing themselves that, we're at the, sort of the internal end of history.
And yet I remember the 90s as a time of intense racism. If you were in New York, there was the riots in the neighborhood I'm in now. There was this intense moral panic about black teenagers.
Yep.
There was not just the Central Park Five. There was this whole idea they would be doing something called wilding all the time, going crazy. Then there was a variation called whirlpooling. If they were if black teenagers were placed inside a swimming pool, they'd
go around the pool really fast and drown people in the middle.
No, they'd surround a girl and take her bathing suit off.
Jesus fucking hell.
It was just like an endless moral panic about black teenagers. That was when the Clintons were saying some were super predators.
Right.
That's right.
It was just a really, really ugly time. And then,
it really was this point of now racism is over, so we can get back to the real problem, which is all these black people that are around.
Yes, exactly. This movie is like a placeholder for an examination of race. Yeah. It's like, examination of race TK, we'll put something here if we can think of it. Oh, we couldn't think of anything. Sorry,
and that's interesting too, because I feel like with where things are at now, this pattern seems to be repeating in some ways. I've noticed that there are some pieces of media that will similarly want to put forward certain people, do certain casting decisions, things like that, in a way that is intended to make a statement, but they sometimes forget to make the statement. Now, because it is, 2002 and not 1990, we don't get horribly racist shit that's put out. And instead, what we get is just sort of more flat and uninteresting and isn't saying much of anything. But it's, I think, a similar dynamic in some ways.
Will Smith saying fairy lives don't matter today.
Yes. It's almost as though America has a heart condition.
Oh.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm pretty bad.
Many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
All right, folks, that's it for this one. Stay tuned and check out this weekend. We're going to have a big bonus episode where, I made Josh and AJ and, myself watch this really horrible piece of right-wing propaganda, and we're going to be talking about that along with an interview, and that part will be public. But The review of the movie itself is going to be behind the paywall, so check us out on Patreon for that. Oh, and speaking of Patreon, we are not in fact brought to you by the BBC of Badgers. We are brought to you by our patrons at Patreon. I would like to welcome our newest patrons, including Matthew Hall, Adam Kelly, Jack Drummond, Lily, Christina Warner, and and of course, our constant, very special thank you to our $10 patrons, who are Tony Diddy, Timmy Sexton, Hannah White, Nikola Donov, Katie Wall, John Johnson, Harnick and Box Fiorina, Dara Swisher, Alexa Valentine, Ashley Stoneman, and Silverbear 909. See you next time.